When the Steam Deck was first revealed, I think the first image that popped in a lot of people's minds is the idea of playing big name AAA games on the go. The main handheld in the market right now, the Nintendo Switch, has a great library of first-party and exclusive games, but there are a number of large multi-platform titles present on Xbox, PS4, PS5, PC that just can't make their way to the system because they're a bit out of its performance reach. Even when you look at people who've begun to receive a lot of Steam Decks earlier, right, a lot of the posts and games you're seeing tried out is stuff that you can't really play on the Nintendo Switch or other handhelds at the moment, a particularly big example being, of course, Elden Ring that came out earlier this year. The thing is, though, over the last month as I've been using the Steam Deck, I've found that my uses for it has really morphed slowly over time. There was this initial novelty to trying whatever big-name game I could think of and see how it runs on the system, and for the most part, it does do that well. I'm not going to say that you can't use the Steam Deck for this, but I do find myself oftentimes not choosing to go that route because while the Steam Deck works, it's not always actually the most optimal choice. What I instead find myself really now fully embracing the system for and spending a lot more time on is older titles and indie games. Sure, I could play something like Deathloop on the go, and if it's something that I've already been making progress on PC and I'm just looking for a way to put more time into it when I'm not at my PC tower, then yeah, it is a great solution for that. But for me at least, the experience hasn't been great enough to completely take away from wanting to play in that more kind of traditional PC gaming setup. While the Steam Deck is an impressive handheld, ultimately a lot of these games I do find the best experience to still be done playing on a more traditional PC setup so I can get a better frame rate, and ultimately just feels like the best way to still experience those titles. Indie games though, at least a lot of the ones that I've been playing, the Steam Deck really does leverage the right amount of power to where they're going to play, run, and look beautiful on the system, and there is an entire library of them out there that isn't really anywhere else. Now I know the kind of immediate thought that might come to mind with something like this is, what's the point in buying the Steam Deck, this expensive PC handheld, if you're just going to play games that are super cheap and you could just play on your PC? The handheld form factor really does change though, at least for me, the way I approach my games. PC has always been something where I kind of know what I'm getting into. There's a specific game I want to play, I want to get in that kind of ready to go stance, sit down, battle station, whatever you want to call it, and my focus is on that game. Handhelds though, especially in the age of digital games being made available, I think have really lent themselves to a slightly more casual experience where you have the opportunity to really just kind of browse and look around and see what's on there and just try out different stuff. And I think a perfect example of this is a game that I stumbled upon about a week ago, had never heard of before, and completely fell in love with, basically thanks to the Steam Deck, Crystal Project. I've been on a really big Final Fantasy kick lately. That was one of my favorite franchises growing up, and while I did fall off a little bit in the later years, I've just been getting this kind of urge lately of wanting to re-experience a lot of my favorite ones, which also always comes with that additional feeling of, you also might want to find something new that is able to scratch that same itch. Now, part of this happened because with my Steam Deck, I purchased the entire collection of Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster games, which I started juggling around for a bit, and that led to recommendations that brought this game to my attention. Crystal Project is this small indie title. As far as I can tell, I think the studio is just one person, and it's targeted at being this old school style Final Fantasy with a focus on building a team using different job classes, but instead of relying on the kind of more traditional epic fantasy plot, it just embraces the fact that you're playing this more so for fun. You're making a set of adventures and you're going out to explore the world and get stronger, beat bigger enemies, and more than anything, the journey itself is what matters. This isn't necessarily some kind of official review because I haven't played entirely through it. I've been soaking quite a bit of time though. Honestly, actually restarting it a few times, messing around with different party comps. I know there's ways to respec later, but it's just the way my brain works. I keep wanting to try different stuff right out the gate. And it really is this incredible remix of the kind of classic formula that older FF games were known for. I think what really makes it shine for me, aside from the charming visuals and great music, is the fact that the combat system in it really does emphasize how interesting it is to build different characters different ways. There are aggro mechanics, you actually have to build a character as a tank to try and hold on to that, while damage-dealing characters focus on trying to kill enemies as quickly as possible. Healers have to worry about aggro as well if they're really keeping the tank super alive. You're really encouraged to mix up and mess around with all these different classes. Whether you want to make a tank that can also offer some support healing, a damage dealer that can maybe off-tank when you need it, status effects, buffing, debuffing, exploiting enemies' weaknesses. And while some of the early on classes you get are very traditional, straightforward concepts, like the fighter, the offensive mage, the healer, there's also a lot of the more experimental ones that clearly, again, take inspiration from Final Fantasy, like the Scholar, which is basically a blue mage learning a really weird mixture of spells that are gained by fighting specific monsters. This is all accompanied by an exploration emphasis where there's a lot more platforming and secret areas and little nooks and crannies to kind of prod at that wouldn't exist in a more traditional Final Fantasy game, that also ends up making it feel like a very different experience. Because again, the real focus here, gameplay and story-wise, is the adventure itself and not necessarily you have to go get to the big bad evil castle. Now, the point of this video is not to just gush about how cool I think this game is, although if you are a fan of old school JRPGs, Final Fantasy, whatever, definitely give it a look, especially at its price point. It's really freaking cool. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is a interesting, unique little gem of a game that I would not have discovered otherwise if it wasn't for the fact that I was messing around on the Steam Deck. And it really is the kind of experience that I think is perfectly suited to it. Yeah, sure, I could play something like Elden Ring instead, and yeah, that is going to be the kind of thing I dive into on occasion, but whenever I play something like that on Steam Deck, I just can't help but get this scratching feeling in the back of my head where I just think, yeah, this is cool, but I know it runs better, looks better, and ultimately will play better with certain controller types that I can use on a more traditional PC setup. Whereas something like Crystal Project, this is such a cool, unique little experience that perfectly feels at home in a handheld, and the Steam Deck is really the only way to do that right now. This game is not on the Switch, it's not really on any other platform outside of being on PC, and the Steam Deck is giving me this perfect way to experience and play it. And I think what really solidifies this in my mind, at least, is that the games that I find myself gravitating towards more and more and more aren't those games that are the big AAA experiences, but are instead those older games that got a port, a remake, or remaster on PC that now feels really great on the Steam Deck. You know, one of the things I tweeted a couple weeks ago that got a little bit of traction was trying out Persona 4 Golden once it got verified for the Steam Deck. And that is honestly one of my favorite experiences on the Steam Deck right now. Because yeah, sure, that game was available on the PS Vita, that's where it initially launched for the Golden version, and that version is still perfectly playable and great, but on the Steam Deck I'm getting a larger screen with updated resolutions and visuals, and most importantly, a smooth, buttery 60 frames that the Vita version did not have. And so, yes, there is the nostalgic part of me that loves the idea of playing the original game on my PS2 or booting up the one on the Vita. The Steam Deck has become, for me, the best way to play it. And even like I mentioned earlier, you know, the way I discovered Crystal Project is that I've been playing the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, which for whatever reason haven't made their way to any system other than PC and mobile. And so if I'm not going to have that game on the Switch, the Steam Deck is the best other way for me to use it, and has become another large part of my playtime on that system. Also, by the way, if you haven't watched my channel a lot, yeah, hi, obviously, I really like RPGs a lot. The main point that I really want to make with this video is that, look, there's nothing wrong with being interested in the Steam Deck for a lot of these larger experiences that aren't traditionally available on a handheld. That is still something the Steam Deck is able to do, and it is a really cool use of it, but I feel like there's been this disservice where that's really been the kind of big, obvious appeal for a lot of people, when honestly, I think one of the really cool things about it is how much it can open up and expose a lot of really cool game experiences that are locked on PC, but make a whole lot of sense in handheld form. Whether that's older games that have been ported, remastered, and released on PC that on the Steam Deck can look and run better than they ever could on their past native systems, or on completely new experiences like Crystal Project that can't be played elsewhere. You know, the Steam Deck as a platform is something that I still have my slightly mixed feelings about, which I've talked about in past videos. If you haven't watched those, make sure to check those out as well. But ultimately, what I've really found myself falling in love with this system for is that I think it's absolutely perfect for indie and older games. So those are just some new thoughts I've been having about the Steam Deck. Again, I think Crystal Project is a really freaking cool game, so you should check that out if you had not heard of it before. I'll link that down below in the description. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button to let me know. Hit dislike if you didn't for whatever reason. You can't see the ratio, but I can, so it's good info to have. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.